Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Worship Artistry Podcast, brought to you by worshipartistry.com. This is the place where worship musicians come to learn, laugh, and grow. Our mission is to bring our best so we can help you bring yours. Whether you're with us live or listening to the podcast later on, we're so thankful for you. We really do love this community. My name is Dan Egan. As always, we've got Bethany Flint in the chat room, just going crazy on the keyboard, and a man who just does not need an introduction, the Apostle Jason Houtsma. What's up, brother?
I don't even know what to say to that one.
Well, you were
Bishop. Aren't we all apostles in some way?
Well, we couldn't quite understand the definition of bishop last week, so I thought we would go with apostle this week, which I also don't understand.
I'm not going to get into it. This isn't a theology podcast. This is a music and worship podcast. Totally different thing.
No. Yeah, you're right.
I guess it's not totally different. It's involved.
Well,
but
you were my bishop last week. Today, you're my apostle. And I love you. So
now I follow you? Is that what you just said?
Oh.
I'm an apostle of Dan?
Well, see, again, I don't know what it means, so apparently.
I'm an apostle of Jesus Christ, like Paul.
All right. Well, how are things with you, my man?
Be an apostle. I remember that from Bible quiz.
Oh, God. I was on that team.
No, you weren't. You were on the team.
Oh, yeah.
Was it you or your brother that actually dated my cousin because of Bible quiz?
Ooh.
That was John.
Yes.
Hey, Miranda. Long time no see.
Miranda. That's a name from the past. That was my brother.
Yes.
I was dating Jesus.
Your brother Miranda.
Well, I'm sure everyone loved that. Besides that, how are things with you, my man? How's things tell everybody about our world right now.
Oh man, my world is good right now. I was driving and I saw the word rad. And the cool thing about having music at your fingertips is I saw the word rad and I immediately thought of the movie Rad. And it was just like initial search, Thunder in Your Heart, song from the movie Rad.
Send me an angel.
Boom, it's up. And I'm just living back in the 80s thinking about the greatest movie of all time.
Dude, I will still listen to that music. It's epic.
Break the ice, man.
Wow, bro. BMX, dancing on bikes in school gyms. What's better than that?
Send me an angel. It's all there. I mean, are there any other movies? I mean, you have a guy named Crew, of course, because what else would he be named? And he's like the small town kid who's the paper boy that like delivers the paper like a total BMX stunt rider. And then like he's so cool he can beat the guy that's I don't know spoilers, but takes on Bart on Hell Track.
Bart. I love it. The enemy's name is Bart.
And it actually had Rachel from Full House on it.
I know.
She was the love interest, and the mom was Adrian from Rocky.
Wow. Good memory. Wow.
It's a big cast.
I do remember when he jumped through a pool, or he went down into a dry pool and came out and did a 360 while he was delivering papers. I thought that was amazing.
Because that's what all paper boys do. I never wanted to be a paper boy so bad in my life.
Well, Jay,
but I digress.
Thanks for that. What about worship artistry? Anything going on in worship artistry?
Yeah, actually, we've really been having a lot of great content on the site. We just posted the song Endless Praise by Planet Shakers, which the lesson for that is crazy. I think that might have been one of the longest lessons we've ever done. And it's just very rhythmic. It has a lot of cool technique. We've had some great articles. A number of people had asked us about leading worship on electric guitar and some tips on that. And so we got some good stuff going there, as well as Ryan did something on playing B3 for worship, which is totally different than playing keyboard other ways. So really great high quality lesson in the 101 section. So we got stuff pumping. It's been a set of epic content, as you like to say.
I do like epic.
And speaking of epic content, who's our guest today, Dan?
Well, my friend, we have a drumming legend. His name is Carl Albrecht. And as I said last week, he plays with Paul Walash a ton. He's played with even Leanne Rimes. So the drumming...
He actually corrected us. Let me jump in there. He actually corrected us. He's played on Leanne Rimes' records, but he hasn't actually played with her. He wanted to point that out. He's a man of integrity.
Okay, I like that. Okay. Yeah, buddy, we have a drum legend today, Carl Albrecht. plays mostly with Paul Balash. He's also played on Leanne Rhyme Records. Just a beast in the industry. So we have a really cool.
I mean, you can keep going. I mean, it's Tim Hughes, it's Jason Upton, you can just, if you go to carlalbrecht.com, his bio is amazing. I mean, he's really been doing worship drumming since they allowed drummers to play worship.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of a pioneer. So you and Josh and him just go off. It's a lot of fun.
I don't want to spoil anything. Well, we're about to go into the interview, but I mean, just in terms of just his wisdom and some of the things he brought. I know, he talked about competitiveness in terms of working with other musicians and how he just has such an amazing perspective on that. He doesn't just totally shun it, but he really gets something out of it. He talks a ton about gear, and he also just talks about heart for worship and preparation and everything that goes into that. I mean, I found myself just grinning ear to ear the whole time he was talking, because I was just like, that's so good. I was actually sketching notes. So I'm excited for you guys to hear it.
All right. Well, before we get into it, let's take a quick break. And when we get back, Carl Albrecht.
Hey Josh, one of the most common comments we get here at Worship Artistry is that someone finally figured out how to teach on the internet. Should we tell the people what Worship Artistry is?
Sure. Worship Artistry is an online resource featuring full 5-piece band arrangements of all the latest worship songs.
Yeah, a lot of churches don't have the 12-piece band to cover all the parts on the latest tunes, but still want to sound like the original recording. Worship Artistry takes the master recordings and breaks them down into parts for electric, acoustic, bass, drums, and keyboard. And when you put them together on Sunday, they sound just like the record.
And what makes it so brilliant is the lessons are super easy to navigate, so your beginners get tons of video instructions with charts, tabs, and sheet music, while your advanced players can simply watch playthroughs of each part and be on their way.
The other thing that's beautiful is worship pastors can rest easily knowing we've done our homework in the licensing department, so it's all legit.
Yeah, man, no shady internet hijinks going on here.
So head over to worshipartistry.com and sign up for your free trial. Now let's get back to this podcast. Hey everyone, a quick little note on Carl Albrecht's interview. Normally, the way that we get our high quality audio is that we record everyone's audio separate and we edit it together into the podcast later. Unfortunately, Carl's high quality audio crashed, and so rather than having the edited together, we just have the unedited internet video clip that we were able to take. We were able to get the audio from it. It's not as high quality as we normally like to do, but we think the content is well worth a few pops and hisses. So we're going to pick up on the interview. We've just asked Carl how he got involved with playing with Paul Balash.
I met Paul on early Ron Canoli recordings, actually. He was writing songs already for Integrity. I don't think he'd done his first solo record yet. But we met there at the recordings, and then we had done some live events for Integrity and just kind of hit it off. And he says, hey, man, I want to do some more stuff. You want to come out and do some events? And literally, that's how it kind of connected, and we enjoyed each other. And we're kind of brothers, band of brothers are the guys, we've been doing it a long time. So, yeah, that's kind of how it first started. And even though Paul's been kind of my primary gig, so to speak, I still work with other people and working more in Nashville, actually staying home more, producing and doing sessions and writing. And so I'm really kind of staying put more than I'm trying to be out on the road. But Paul and I work together occasionally still. So yeah, it's been really good. He's a great friend, really respect what he's done. He's had such a huge impact in the worship community, and it's really been awesome to be part of what he's been called to do as well. So it's fun. We have a great time together, and I appreciate that he's always pushing himself and looking for what the Lord is doing and surrounding himself with people that can help him grow. And it's a really cool thing to see that. And along with the writing and the doing the records and leading worship, I mean, his stuff is all a lot. It's been a lot about the training. It's been about, we do seminars, we do clinics. He's also done a big series of DVDs as well. And it's been great to be part of that too. So
one other thing I wanted to talk about was the differences between a studio drummer and a live drummer. So you do both.
yeah.
So what are some differences? You hear people say, "Oh, in the studio, you're going to hear it forever." So you've got to play it right, and it's got to be dead on. But at the same time, when you're playing live, you don't necessarily want to play it wrong, just because you're not going to hear it again. But so what are some, maybe some differences of the two?
I think maybe kind of the classic understanding of a studio player as compared to a live player is that there is that thing in the studio where it's it's just demanded that it's precise. And so the consistency of the player being able to really get that pocket to work, and probably simplifying things a bit. I know when we're playing live, even with Paul in the band, even though we all do recording work and they're really good, everybody's kind of a producer. Everybody hears the music in that way. Even with Paul's live stuff, there are some times where Paul wants a little more energy than what we did on the record. So, he say, hey, give me a little bit more there, or go to this right away. Because on the recording, we waited a verse before you came in and did that thing. But boy, for the live thing, I want the energy. Or, maybe give me another fill. Although Paul is a guy, as a producer too, he doesn't like things to get too complicated. He likes the music to be really clear. He likes drums to be very, what I call meat and potatoes, just lay a good solid foundation and don't get in the way of the vocals. So I have to be even careful at this stage because I get very emotional and I might react, and I've got to remember like, oh, wait a minute, Paul doesn't like that fill, don't do something weird that'll throw him off, and that's totally cool, and then you work with a different artist and they may want a whole other thing. So you're right. As far as doing studio work, you are kind of doing something that's going to be eternal, at least in the recording sense. So you're being a lot more meticulous about, man, I want to build this song just right. And, because it's going to be there forever. And live, we have a little more flexibility. And, but I think nowadays the demand has come up quite a bit to say you want your live player to kind of bring that level of professionalism too. And I can say from observing of 30 years of playing professionally, man, the bar has come way up. Back years ago when Integrity first started, we rarely saw church musicians able to do the recordings. I mean, that was just almost never going to happen. And then over years, 10, 15, 20 years, we're like, wow, this band's great. And they've been playing with a metronome and a click track, and they're using all the technology. And, now you go into so many churches where the bands are great. I mean, the bar has come up and musicians do a lot better work. And so I would say that line is getting less blurred of being a session player and a live player. Although I can say in Nashville, the guys that stay in town to do sessions pretty much do all the work, or the bulk of it. And if you're known, if the reputation gets out that you're on the road, it's almost like a death sentence to recording, So at least in this town, that can happen. Although, I'm fortunate I get calls for both. But I can tell that people are like, well, I wasn't going to call you because I knew you're busy. I'm like, I'm not busy, man. Call me. I'm here. And I'm traveling less and less. In fact, I'm kind of more off the road now than ever. And although Paul in the band does things, I mean, he's writing a lot and working on other things. So Paul's gig and other things traveling aren't as busy as they used to be. Sorry, that's a long answer, but
no, it's perfect.
Yeah, the session thing and live thing is definitely a little different. Whereas like session thing is probably more precise. Live, you can kind of bring it more energy and the band's more
on the mood.
Yeah, you're trying to capture the moment and work with the flow of things. In the studio, you're working in 3-minute segments. You're trying to make this one song work.
So quick question about that. So two really. It's kind of a two-parter.
Yeah.
But one is, which do you prefer, playing live or playing in the studio? And then the second is, when you come into the studio and, for example, you're playing with all these different players. If you're sitting there with somebody that you play with on the road all the time, and you guys sit down and they say, okay, go ahead and play a beat like this, what they're talking about because you've been playing with them for a while and that sort of thing. What happens when you go in with like somebody who's not even there? The artist isn't even there. Like, how does that get communicated? It's like, okay, the song's this tempo. Here's the format. How does that come together?
It's still tricky. And you're right. I mean, it's still art, and it's always organic, I guess is a good word that you'd never fully know. Artganic. That's great. I like that. But
TM.
Boom. So when you work with guys a lot, they can speak to you. You know what I'm saying? They can tell you, you kind of read each other. And even if they don't like it, you can read that like, oh, that didn't work so good, did it? Like, no, man, can we try this? And you're like, okay. So even with Paul and the guys or other artists that I've recorded with, when you know the players, yeah, sure, there's almost this kind of sixth sense of what's going on, and you communicate and you kind of feel it. If there's not the happy face and like, yes, kind of reaction, you're like, well, let's do something else. Let's try this. And no matter how long I've done it, I've tried to remember, like, you're always serving these people. So with Paul gets the final say, or whoever's producing with him. A lot of times Michael Rossback will produce, or Ben Gal. And there's a lot of mutual respect, and yet they get the final word on it. So if like they want the feel to work like this, or the drum tune different, or bro, can you do this more? And I don't go like, hey man, forget that. This is this is me. You just can't do that. So even with guys you've worked with a long time, and gals, there's some great musicians and producers that are doing stuff. You just got to respect the people you work with. And you're right. When it's new people, or especially when an artist isn't there, that can be a little tricky, because I've sent tracks in, like I do a lot of stuff in my studio, and send files out. And then I get a call back. Hey man, that feels great, but the artist really wants to hear this. So in that setting, you risk the idea of, well, I've got to redo this or change a section or something because the artist didn't get to hear it while we were tracking. So that's the challenge of doing things when not everybody's in the room. And you just go with the flow. You don't take it personal. You don't get, that kind of like diva thing where like, man, this is what I do and you got to like it. You just can't do that unless you want to keep working or not work. And so you just got to learn to serve people and stay humble, and then, things will work out. I like them both. Is that a cop out?
No.
They both have such different things. When I've been real busy in the studio, which I'm not in there every day, and not many players are anymore, but if I'm in a long stretch of where all it is sitting in the room playing tunes, I mean, I still love it, love to get the call. I love the inspiration of doing that, but I start missing being out and watching how music affects people, especially in worship. I want to be worshiping. So even when I'm home, I still play at churches on Sunday, or whatever, whatever that is. But yeah, I would say probably there's a specialness to being in the studio with other creative people, just getting something right. And then the joy of kind of hearing that, recorded well, and think, man, that's awesome. That's going to be set in stone because we've done this together. So yeah, if somebody said, well, you have to give one of them up, that would be a tough decision, because I don't think many players get stuck with that. But I would probably choose doing session work over doing live things.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Carl, you said earlier, we were talking about, just the bar that has been raised over the years in church, just in playing worship music, and as the bands are progressing and better players, and better well-rounded players, I guess you could say.
Right.
Something that's been on my heart lately is just coming prepared. Is there a bar to set for your worship team? Is there a certain standard or expectation as a worship leader that they should have for the guys on their worship team? I just wanted to talk about that and get your opinion. I mean, most of the churches, at least where I'm from, we're working with volunteers, so you're working with people in your congregation. We're not hiring out guitar players every Sunday morning, and stuff like that. So being that they're volunteers and the body of the church, like what kind of expectations, what's your approach on that?
Yeah, man, Josh, that is an awesome question. So, I think my philosophy or, my belief of this is whether you're paid or you volunteer, which I kind of hate that word because musicians and people in general kind of use that as an excuse to cop out and do cheap work, which is not cool. I think scripturally, the Lord says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And I apply that to whether it's a recording session or a tour, or coming home and on Sunday morning saying, I'll be there and I'll bring my best to this music to serve the people and to serve the Lord. So that's not being hyper spiritual. That's just being real with how you honor God with what he's given you. So when I'm working with other musicians and teams, and this is still what I do to this day, if I said I'll come home and do that, and it could be a volunteer thing, or it could be, rather than paying, several $100s, it's only going to pay gas money or $50 or whatever. I don't get in my mind where this job is worth this much love.
Right. Yeah.
So to speak, as a player. So people send me MP3s and the music, and I'm downloading it on my computer, and I'm getting stuff ready, and I need this loop, and I get that loop loaded, and I get the clicks mapped out, and it might be just a little church that's just needing help. And they're like, wow, you practiced, this music. So I think every musician, not just the drummer, needs to really just think, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be as good as I can be in every situation. And that kind of eliminates that weird mind game we can get in with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just, I think it messes us up in terms of what we're called to do, really. And ultimately, it really blesses people. And I think it really, more importantly, it totally honors the Lord that you're being faithful with this thing that God put in you. So, whether it's a demo or a custom record or a master track kind of thing, or if it's a freelance a volunteer church thing, or if it's a big tour, I kind of look at it like I'm prepping the music as good as I can for every situation. And I encourage my players, anytime I'm kind of an MD, I'm like, man, bring this, get it ready, and they'll say, oh man, I'm really busy. And I'm like, say, well, maybe, can you do this right now? Well, yeah, I want to do it. Yeah, I really want to do it, bro. I say, okay, well, I really expect you to be awesome.
Yeah, right.
And, don't play the game with me well, it's only for $50. I'm like, forget that. I kind of immediately, I don't beat people up, but I try to get them to think about what they're really called to do. And I haven't always done it perfectly. I can specifically remember moments where I came with less than my A game and I was embarrassed. Man, I know I'm better than this, and I really blew it. So I just kind of man, Lord, I repent of that, and I'm just going to always do my best thing.
Do you find yourself, because you hold that standard of yourself, do you find yourself having to say no to more gigs because you're trying to find that balance and saying, oh, this gig came up, man, I'd really love to do that, but I know I don't really have the time to prepare for it because I'm also doing all those other things. Do you find yourself having to turn down stuff you wish you could and find the balance yourself?
Yeah, well, not too often. It seems like seems like the calls come in a certain order and there's time to prepare for it. And if I get in a jam, if somebody needs something last minute, oh my gosh, this happened, can you come tomorrow or today? I'm like, ooh. They say it's okay, just come. And you just, in that moment, that you are just going to try to be aware of the music and learn as fast as you can. And man, if there's a coffee break, I get an MP3 and I'm listening and sketching the chart. And so even in those settings, I try to look for a way to make it work. But for me, fortunately, there hasn't been a thing where I've had to turn down a gig because I didn't feel like I could prep it. I always, even if it's tight, I'm like, I might dive in the day before, or I might get the music while I'm headed to the airport, while I'm downloading it and getting it on my phone or my laptop. And I start going to work rather than watching the movie or reading a book. I'm sitting there and getting a scratch pad and doing, drum charts so that I can show up at the rehearsal or even just a sound check and be ready to go.
So what's what's your charting technique? Is there a method that kind of works for you, like when you're prepping, for something that's songs that you don't know, I mean, we all have those that we're really familiar with, if it's a new artist or, whatever.
Yeah, the most basic thing you could do is really just, even if you don't write music, just get a piece of paper and go title of song, quarter note equals blah, blah, blah. I always get a metronome marking. Is there a drum loop? I'll even write like, here's the feel of the song, like, hey, straight ahead rock thing, eighth notes, go for it, and then I write away intros over here. And then I write across, I'll write down, oh, it's just kick drum on quarter notes. And then, oh, verse 1, now add snare on 4. So it might just be as simple as taking notes of what the form of the song is. Oh, there's the channel build with the big drum fill into chorus 1. And I write that out in chorus 1. Now it's, doing boom, bap, boom, boom, bap, whatever. You write it basically. I think every drummer should learn how to write some basic music so you understand rhythms, but whatever helps you keep a roadmap going, you can start with that very foundational thing. And then if it's available to you, you can get the things like at Praise Charts or CCLI charts or any of the music companies that offer like the band charts. I'll use those quite a bit if they're available. But if it's hitting you fast, at least do what I call that kind of cheat sheet. Bam, 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 and you get the form in your head and you've got the basic information, and a drummer can get a lot done with that.
For sure. I use that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's my go-to, the cheat sheet.
Yeah. In fact, there's even one of the chapters in my book that you mentioned, the worship drum book. I did a section on like charting for drummers, like what I like to see. And, everything from a lead sheet to a drum score to like this cheat sheet thing. So yeah, every drummer should have a method by which you do that. So
we've talked about
cool.
it on a separate podcast, playing with tracks. Let's hear another opinion on that. Do you playing with Paul? Do you guys use tracks? You just play to a click? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, I'd say 98% of the work with Paul and any artist right now is done with definitely a click track. Almost every song is done to a click. And even when there's not a click, like if an artist just starts a song and it's like, ooh, he pulled that one out of the hat, I'll go to my metronome and start tapping the tempo in and find out where they're feeling the groove. Then when they find that pocket and we're all playing, then I start the click, bam, right there, and we play with the click. So that's almost 100% of the time. But yeah, then the other piece of that is probably 75%, 80% we're doing with backing tracks or what we call stems or drum loops or stuff like that. So yeah, so much music nowadays has that. And, even for the churches now, man, everybody can get like, Loop Community and worship tracks. I think there's several .com sites now that are offering that, where not only are some of them new recordings of it, but some of it is the original recordings, right? Yeah. So, man, we're almost expected to be able to play the song pretty much like we heard it on the record, and then, it's being filled in with the other parts that maybe aren't part of your band, so like even with Paul's guys and other artists, we might have like percussion things I did on the recording, hand drums or shakers and tambourines. The drum loops are there. Maybe a second or third guitar that we don't have that's on tour with us. So yeah, I think that's become the standard. Every tour kind of uses that supplemental track thing to play with. And that's why drummers have to be super locked into playing with recordings and having a good feel to work over that stuff.
Cool. Just another one here. You do a lot of DVDs, a lot of instructional DVDs,
Mm-hmm.
workshops, clinics. So I'm just going to say pick like 3 solid basic tips to someone who might just be getting into playing or just been playing for a short while now.
Yeah, I think, man, the 3, it's funny because you're saying that, and I actually wrote an article concerning like what is the meat, the foundational stuff for a drummer. Well, definitely every other musician would say a drummer with good time. Paul Balash and everybody will say, man, a drummer's got to be able to play with the click. So not only being metronomically good, which we think would always work, but then how does that feel with that? So time, feel, dynamics is huge, because so many drummers, like, they just want to, when I'm in the studio, I can bash away,
Right.
or if we're in a big arena. But a lot of our venues are little churches or a small theater. Man, drummers, you got to learn how to do that thing called playing to the room, play the room. In fact, Josh, I was kind of looking at your little interview on the website. You were talking about this play the room kind of snare drum sound, and that was awesome, man.
Thank you.
So kudos,
Thank you, man.
and that's exactly right. So time, feel, and dynamics. And if I can put the 4th in, it would be a sense of arrangement. Like, be a musician, not just a drummer. And that's true for every player, but think of how it works in the context of a song. Like, yeah, in the intro, I do this, and the verse, I'm building this idea, and so on and so forth.
That.
So those are the foundational things. You don't have to play drum solos like your favorite drummer. You know what I mean? And so nobody's really the world's greatest drummer. Well, Buddy Rich is already in heaven, so we'll salute to Buddy. But anyway, that's the idea. Like, don't worry about being recognized or being a star. It's like, make the music work. So time, feel, dynamics, and arrangement.
That's good stuff. And to that video
Thanks,
too,
man.
as well. I had someone comment on that YouTube video talking about, doing that to your snare kind of makes it kind of like a one-trick pony, as far as tuning goes, But, I kind of explained, and he mentioned dynamics and how important that was, and that you were actually one of, a few worship drummers that he actually looked up to as far as your style and your dynamics. But the dynamics is a huge part. And I love that. I love that you said that. But if you're tuning your snare drum and you've got a ring and snare, no matter how hard you hit that thing, it's still going to be ringing, And I tried to emphasize, like that was what I was trying to cut out, to kind of make it more dry to play to the room. So, but he was
it was cool
for dynamic.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was great, because you were demonstrating how to, rather than thinking of processing the snare to get there, you set the drum up to do that, and that's exactly right. So, man, that was awesome. Yeah, sometimes live, that's a good point about live, is like, the drum's got to sound the way it's supposed to sound right here. I can't expect the engineer to fix it. So, yeah, tricks of like tuning differently, using the tape, doing the padding thing, like underneath the head you were showing, that, sometimes you do extreme things to get the sound to work live that you might be able to do something different within the studio. And, but yeah, getting your sounds together that's really, really important.
That's cool. Yeah. I, on the video that Paul Mabry did for us on a quick little snippet that we had a blog one week on, he mentioned what you just said, is make your drums sound good before the engineer even does anything to them. And that's going to make, it's going to make your drums sound good, and it's going to make their job a lot easier as well. So.
Yeah, exactly. That way you could just put up 2 mics, stereo mics, and a kick mic, maybe. How is that sounding?
Yeah.
So, that's a good encouragement, Josh, is to help drummers be brave and experiment till they like what they're hearing, tuning and muffling and doing things you can learn the rules, but then you got to break the rules sometimes to get that sound to happen.
Exactly.
And that's cool. That's what we have to do. And yeah, kudos to Paul. Paul Mayberry, he's really gotten the whole production thing down. He's really brilliant at that. And, I watch Paul too. I'm stealing ideas from Mabes like everybody else. So, and that's what we do. We kind of watch each other. We learn. We all do that with our heroes. And think, for this song, though, I want it to sound more like that guy, which is totally different than maybe, what you did on the last song. So I think that creative thing of being able to bring up something different for a moment is really good for every musician to keep in mind as they're doing it.
For sure. Well, let's do like a gear rundown of your setup. So you use Yamaha drums, right?
Yep, I'm a Yamaha artist.
We'll
love
there.
working with those guys. So
I was just saying, let's start
the
there.
drum kit. Yeah, what I primarily use right now is Yamaha Maple Custom Absolute, which is a all maple series. That series had a little thinner shell design, and I think the bearing edges were kind of a 45 degrees. So I'm sorry if I don't know all the specs, but it's the Maple Custom Absolute. I've always seemed to be a lover of the sound of maple, whether I was playing Yamaha or Gretsch or Pearl or what. I played kind of, one of the things of traveling a lot is I get to play all these great backline kits. So you get to try a lot of things. But the Yamaha thing landed, and that has worked really well. I can get this kit to kind of do everything. So in that collection, I normally play like a 22 by 16 kick drum. On most sessions now, it's just a 12-inch rack tom and a 16-inch floor. That's become kind of a standard, although I've always liked a lot of drums. But producers are like, bro, can you not bring all those? But I'll keep them in the case. If we want to do something different, sometimes I'll throw up a 14 as a rack and go with an 18-inch floor. But normally the 12-inch rack, the 16-inch floor is the norm. Probably the most common thing I've done in my studio is I kind of keep my rack set up where it's got the 10-inch, the 12-inch, the 14, and the 16-inch tom all there and ready to go. But, I take things and rearrange them according to the song. And then I use like the Yamaha sub kick as a secondary kick drum thing. That's for that low frequency miking thing. Other kick drums, I have a smaller 20-inch kick on occasion, but I really am a lover of the 22-inch by 16. It's real versatile. I can tighten it up and put more padding in, or I can open it wide open and use different heads, and it can sound like so many different drums. Same thing for the toms. Snare drums, I think like every drummer, we have a collection. I've probably got like 20 snare drums. There's other guys that just have tons more. And but I do find myself using this 14 by 7-inch brass shelled Yamaha that sounds amazing for a lot of stuff. I also have a 14 by 5 maple Yamaha drum that goes with that. And then there's a bunch of other ones like brass piccolo drums. And then I have a Ludwig Black Beauty and an acrylite drum and all that, kind of a collection of different stuff.
Standards.
So yeah, all of that. So, but don't feel like you got a lot of drummers like, oh, bummer, man, I can't get all that. I'm like, well, try to get maybe 2 or 3 really good snare drums, like a really fat one, the deep one, get a standard, a good standard, like a 14 by 5 something, and then get a little popcorn or piccolo snare as that third. And you can do a lot of gigs with those 3.
Yeah,
so that's the
I'm not a big snare guy. I don't have, I'm envious of you, man. I only have a few. So I'm trying to
and
grow that collection.
You will. Drummers are notorious, like guitar players. It's never enough. But I would say, don't let that be. You're great, Josh. I've already heard what you're playing, so you're doing great work. I think a lot of it comes down to knowing how to tune, get the sound you want, and knowing your gear and getting that to work. So really, man, you can do a lot with one drum kit and a couple snares or one snare and just tune. I've done that. I've traveled on session things and take that one favorite snare and like tune it way down for one song, and then I take all the tape off and crank it way up, and it sounds like a Stuart Copeland snare. So the idea of like becoming a really good drum tuning expert definitely helps. It's knowing the tricks is what makes the difference.
Yeah. Have you seen the video on the drum tuning technique to where there's some way you do it to where you only at the end you only worry about the two lugs down at the bottom, and if you want to go up, you crank one side, and then if you want to go the other way, or it's something weird. I'll have to find the video. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I think I've seen that
Yeah.
same one. I do that a lot, even in live gigs. Like we'll play a song and I'm cranking down two lugs right
Yeah.
next to me. I think just by the need of getting it done
Yeah, of course.
fast, I'm like, tune it up real quick and take a little tape off and then let that puppy really ring a little bit. Oh, now we're headed into some ballads. Oh, quick,
Yeah,
tune it
yeah.
way down till it wrinkles and put a some tape on there and a zero ring, and bam, all of a sudden it's like
Yeah,
whoosh, So it's being able to do the quick stuff like that. Yeah, learn those tricks because that'll really come in handy.
So
Cool.
going on with gear, so you play Yamaha drums.
Yeah.
What kind
Yamaha
of cymbals are
drums.
you using?
I'm a heartbeat cymbal guy. Love what Noel and the guys, Noel, oh gosh, sorry, blanked out Noel's last name. He'd hit me for forgetting. He's been a real trooper. He's a designer, an entrepreneur. He got a factory in Turkey, and he's doing these heartbeat cymbals, really designing cymbals for, the church, for worship musicians, for Christian bands. His whole heart was to serve us as a community of drummers. I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. And, best part is they sound awesome. So I love the heartbeat cymbal stuff. You can go check out heartbeatpercussion.com or just Google heartbeat cymbals and you're going to see them come up. And it really helped in terms of like finding a cymbal that sounded really smooth and pretty, but they're darker and they don't overpower the band. So I have several different series, but I find that I'm using the custom dry quite a bit. Trying to get away from my cymbals being too loud,
Yeah.
which seems to be the problem for most drummers.
Yeah, I've had a lot of questions talking about cymbals and stuff like that. So are you a big cymbal kind of guy? Are you a smaller cymbal? Everybody's got
I kind of have a little bit of everything, but primarily right now it's like a 22-inch medium ride. Okay. Like I say, that custom dry thing. There's a 20-inch crash and a 19-inch crash, which is actually pretty big.
Yeah.
But with these dry series that the guys came up with at Heartbeat, I can kind of hit them hard and they'll get big, or you can just kind of do a light wash and I can either crash them all or ride on them all, which is really neat to be able to have that color available to you,
Sure.
And then the hi-hats are, am I using I've got a set of 14s and a set of 15s, and I go back and forth between those two. But basically, I was looking for just something that would be drier and not bother the engineer or the rest of the band. Because, the guys would be singing like, man, you're killing me with your crash cymbal over there. So, and I even purposefully try not to hit my cymbals as hard. And I would say that for drummers, learn how to get good balance, like get your kick and snare hitting good and your balance between that and the toms. But when you come up to the top, don't smack the cymbals too hard. They're going to speak pretty quickly. But even with that, when I was playing other cymbals, I would still get too loud. But the heartbeat stuff has really helped me get that more under control.
Nice. So those hats are still the custom dry as well. The whole whole series that you've been playing is just the custom.
Yeah, the classic series. I've got a set of the classic series heartbeats, and they sound like more your standard, almost Zildjian A series.
So
it's just real. Yeah, it's brighter, a classic sound, and then the dries just have worked out perfectly. It kind of solved a lot of the problem I was having with that.
Nice, man. Heads. What's your favorite heads? Heads and sticks.
Evans drum. Yeah, Evans drum heads, Vader sticks, Shure microphones. These are all my sponsors right now. SKB cases, they've all been super helpful. Evans heads, I've, again, having had so many years to try things, what I found with the Evans heads is that they were so consistent. And there's a lot of variety to choose from. And, no slamming against the other companies. I mean, everybody honestly is making great stuff. It's just a matter of apples and oranges. What do you want to hear? So, but I really like, what I'm getting with the Evans. And again, the consistency of them has been real helpful, like putting up, several toms and I know they're exactly right, and having a choice, of trying different things out. I normally use like the clear G2s on top of the toms and then clear G1 or resonant on the bottom. And that's pretty fat sounding. And then if I want to muffle, I've got a lot of control. I'm not normally one to use heads that kind of have pre-muffling, too much pinstriping, or they're kind of drying them out too quick. I'd rather put tape on them and adjust as I go rather than have the drum head doing that for me. On the kick, I usually use like a EQ3, which is a double ply. So on kick drums and tops of toms, it's always double plies for me. Even if I go with a coated head, it's still double ply. Coating gives you a little drier sound with a little more snap of the stick, I think. And then on the snare drum, I use that typical, what they call the power reverse dot, where they put the plastic dot reinforcement on the underside of the snare head. And that's kind of a standard on most of my snare drums, except where I want them to ring a lot. I'll just go to like either a G1, which is a standard single ply head, or even something thinner than that. So the Evans stuff has been really cool. Vader sticks, man, been so consistent for years. And I honestly have kind of gone off and tried some other things, and then I'm like, nope, where are my Vader sticks? Love those Vader. Los Angeles 5A series is kind of my go-to stick. But again, in a lot of venues trying to play softer, I'll even drop down to a 7A, and Vader calls those the Manhattans. So a Manhattan 7A for Vader. And then I use like their splash sticks and mallets and all that too. So, but my stick bag looks pretty ratty. Like I'll have all kinds of weird stuff in there, ultra flex stuff and these sticks I've never tried before. So again, drummers, even if you have favorite stuff, don't be afraid to keep experimenting for the sake of challenging yourself and growing. It's always important to keep doing that.
A lot of my favorite sounds that I've found have been by accident.
Amen. Yeah. It's like, oh, people say, how did you come up with that?
Know.
And I go like, hey, I just reached down there and there it was. It worked, or this thing happened. So yeah, it's always trying to keep stirring up your creativity and looking for a sound.
Thing that I've noticed, just in the way that you talk about certain things, you mentioned the drum community. Musicians so often are so competitive with one another, and you find that insecurity in people, and that kind of like, well, if you're good, then how do you relate to me? And it a lot of times doesn't feel like a very generous community. And one thing we do at Worship Artistry is really try and push like generosity and encouragement and helping people, and just, this is what we're about. And you seem to really live that in just the way that you approach music. Can you just tell us a little bit maybe about where that came from, or how you maintain that, especially in a world where it's professional? And I'm sure there's no lack of competitiveness in the professional drumming world.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Probably for every musician. By the nature of music, you feel it's competitive. I mean, we have the Grammy Awards, and you've got television, and you've got artists. Even in that world, I think of learning how to be part of a community and respecting your peers is super important. And of course, even more so in the worship world, ministry thing in churches. I mean, gosh, you could even just be a drummer at a church and think, man, there's 2 or 3 drummers here. And like, I hope I get to keep playing. Oh, that guy's really good. I really hate him, which you shouldn't think that. But I mean, I'm like everybody else, I've gone through periods where like, man, it's like, wow, these guys are great. And look what's happening. And am I going to get the next call? And I like the idea that it pushes, again, raising that bar has really challenged me. I watch players all the time, and younger players, I'm becoming kind of the mature player. I've had a long run and it's good and I keep doing it. But one thing that makes me keep going is the fact that I take it as a learning tool and really go like, wow, that's awesome, dude. How do you do that? Or if somebody is doing great work, they're kind of my hero and I want to learn from them too. So rather than feeling like, well, I can play better than that, or like, man, they should call me. I mean, I have, through my career, and even now I watch where there are times you get the call and sometimes you don't. So I kind of go, well, I'm going to learn from that. Well, what do I need to do? What, and it's not wrong to steal ideas from people, like I mentioned earlier, watching Mabes, do his thing, or any of these great drummers, the friends I have here in Nashville and guys on the road, I watch them play like, that's really cool. Rather than standing there thinking like, I never stand there and think, well, I can do that, or I could do that. That's just so negative. So anytime that voice starts speaking to you, just tell him to be quiet. It's really the enemy. And I won't turn this into a sermon, but it really is the enemy of what we're called to do. He's always out to discourage us. And I think that's true in any career. So that's what I do. I just have chosen to keep learning, try to stay humble. And when somebody else is doing great work, I am honestly impressed with that. Like, man, look at how great, yes, this whole generation of players coming up. And I watch YouTube and think, oh my gosh, look at that. And I'll even post it at my Facebook, like, hey, check this out. This is awesome. So not to be discouraged, but inspired. That's the key. Every time we watched Buddy Rich do a solo, or Vinny Colaiuta, or Steve Gadd, or and any of the great Christian drummers, all those guys that we're talking about, it's just like, man, it's just like, wow, that just, it challenges me. So I choose to let it continue to be a challenge and to see what God can help me learn from it. And what I can't do, I don't beat myself up for it. I just kind of like, I keep working it, So that's the key, I think. And, when I have a downtime where I'm kind of like not living that perfectly, I got to preach to myself and like say, man, get your head on straight and move on, So that's what I try to do. And it has helped a lot.
Wow, that was really, really great stuff.
Yeah, and honestly, you didn't even hear the half of it. We had some great questions come in at the end, and we decided not to put the questions in the podcast because it just gets kind of long and some of the context gets out of the way. But you can go over to worshipartistry.com/greenroom, and if you just do a search for Carl Albrecht, we've actually transcribed the kind of the top 3 questions out of that whole session. So I highly recommend you go check that out. And speaking of questions, Dan, what time is it?
It is member mail time. Hit it.
All right, this week our question is from Robert from Louisiana. And his question is, I try and do a Louisiana accent, but I just feel like it would come out offensive in the end.
Do it.
But Robert asked the question.
No, do the Louisiana accent.
I can't. I don't know how to.
All right.
I'll get my friend Rebecca in here. She can turn it on. It's pretty amazing. She's from Louisiana, and she can really rock it when she wants to.
Yeah, y'all come back now. That's how you do it.
Robert, I'm sure you don't sound like that. But anyway, Robert's question in just a boring Northwest accent is, hey guys, I love the website. So much content goes into this stuff and it's so detailed. What's the process of building a lesson from scratch? Oh, Robert, the rabbit hole you want to jump down to.
It's a good question. I think people do need to know this. Jay, let me talk about the licensing real quick, and then you can get into the technical aspects if you don't mind. I'd like.
By all means, I'd love to have somebody else talk about licensing.
Yeah, I know. That's probably the biggest challenge of what we do, and takes, well, I wouldn't say the most time, but it can be time consuming. So the way it works is we're streaming these songs. We're using the masters, the actual recordings, so you guys can play with the pros. So we're talking all the tracks and everything. So we have to pay for those. We got to pay the record labels and the publishers. And you wouldn't believe how difficult that can be at times to.
It's like, please take my money. And they're like, no.
Yeah, the red tape. And, a lot of times we say, oh, this is kind of what's wrong with the record music industry right now. We're trying to pay you. And we do pay them. So, but it's been very difficult getting these contracts in place over the years with all the different record labels. And then when you think about co-writers, every song these days has multiple, well, not every song, but most songs have multiple writers. And when there's a lot of people in the pie getting a slice, the accounting and the logistics on that are extremely difficult. But because we are all about, we want to live above reproach, we're doing it. We're going to pay everybody what they deserve, and because of that, we have a lot of headaches at times, and But
Bethany, actually, our chat room moderator, is also our licensing coordinator. And actually, since Bethany's gotten involved, it's gotten way better.
Yeah.
Because she's built relationships with people, and she's on it. She's telling us, hey, these are the songs that we need to be doing. Here's the top ones and all that kind of thing. And so having that being taken off like our plate is actually really helpful. Bethany, shout out to Bethany. Type.
Go,
there you go,
Bethany. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Jay, since she's around, she's definitely making our life easier. Tell everyone how you do your really easy lessons that take only about 5 minutes.
Yeah, they're so easy. Man, it's interesting because the way that somewhere along the line in the beginning, we decided, we could go and we can get stem tracks and we can do all that kind of stuff. And we actually chose not to do that. Sometimes we do that to pull out certain little parts that we hear that are kind of buried in the mix. But for the most part, what we're really trying to do is recreate the overall sound of the song. So rather than, like for me, I go and I listen to it. And usually the acoustic guitar lessons are really simple. It's either kind of, because I'm a worship leader, I lead on acoustic, and so I can hear that right away. It's very simple, and then I can go in and teach it. There's a system to teaching it, and then the really fun part is doing like the solo acoustic arrangement, because then I get to get creative with it and say, okay, let's see if we can bring this piano line into the acoustic part and that kind of stuff. That's pretty straightforward. The electric guitar is not that straightforward, because most songs have like a minimum of 3 electric guitars on them. If you went and pulled out the stem tracks, and they're all kind of taking different lead parts. It's not just one, hey, here's the lead guitar and then here's the rhythm and then here's another one. They're switching, they're playing on top of each other. And so there's a lot of interpretation there. And I was actually having a discussion with a guy this week, because he's like, do you make up your own parts? And I'm like, well, no, I don't make up my own parts. I combine parts that are on the record. And so what I do is I listen to the overall sound of the record and then go, okay, here's the electric part that's going to take the lead here. And then this electric guitar part over here takes the lead here. And then these two, this one's playing a complementary role to this one. Well, I can take those two and I can actually put them together and play them by myself. And that'll fill up more space than if I was just playing one on its own. And so that's where a lot of the work goes. And then once that's all laid out, then it's, and all the teachers do this, Ryan especially. Ryan goes crazy on all those keyboard parts. He'll do the same thing, take 3-4 keyboard parts and combine them into one. Bass and drums, whatever those guys do, I don't know. They eat a banana and then go and crank out their stuff. I don't know how they do it. But they, so then we all put together our parts, and then we go and we teach the lesson, and we tab everything ourselves. We do all the sheet music ourselves, and then we shoot them, we put them all on, and then we make sure that they all go together really well. So, whenever you see those like practice mixes and that sort of thing, it's going through and going, okay, this is how it sounds. If you play these 5 parts together, this is how it's going to sound. And we kind of really tuck in the master recording down at the bottom so you can really hear how all those parts fit together. And it's amazing to me. Every time I'm like fist pumping in the air when we put all the parts together, and it's just like, yeah, that's the song. Nobody, except for the one guy in the back that's like, actually, I have all the tracks for that one, and you missed out this ambient guitar part that is in the 2K frequency rate. That guy might hear the difference, but nobody in your congregation is going to know the difference between what we've done and what's on the radio. And what's on the radio is there's so much more going on. And so anyway, that's a really long answer to that question, but it's a really long process. I mean, it's hours and hours of work for each teacher, and then it's putting it all together. So yeah, they're highly intense. You have no idea how frustrating it can be to play a practice loop of a section at like 30 beats per minute, so that even the most basic beginner can understand it. That is one of the trickiest things to do on the site. So lot goes into every lesson, and it's a whole lot of love. So check out Endless Praise this week. Take a look at that and think about what I just said and realize how much we really love you.
Yeah, no, it's a labor of love, isn't it? Well, bro, that's good. That's good. Sorry, I was laughing. Your nerd impression was just brilliant. It reminded me of the big golf tournament, the Masters at Augusta National, the golf.
I'm not familiar. Which one?
Jay, don't play with me.
I watched at your house.
Don't play games with me. Oh, that's right. Well, they got busted years ago. I don't know if you know this. They got busted years ago for adding bird sounds into the telecast. Yeah, just to kind of add to the vibe. And this bird nerd, I think that's the official term, bird nerd, calls in and it's like, oh, so apparently the red heron is migrating to Atlanta these days when it hasn't been in America. Of course the comedian went off on it. I think it was Brian Regan, but I don't know why your nerd impression of like missing a track reminded me of that, but it did, so I thought I'd share it with you.
Well, thank you. That's fantastic. So, Dan, what do we have going next week?
Yeah, next week we've got Ben Davis from bands like By the Tree, Plum. He's played with Carrie Job, just a bass beast. He'll be talking with our bass beast, Daniel, and what they get into is pretty cool. They're talking about how to make your rehearsals, your practices more inspired and efficient. So we're super stoked about that. Well, that wraps it up for us today. Thanks so much, Bethany, in the chat room as always. Josh, Jason, Carl, me, epic. Just really great stuff. If you guys wouldn't mind heading over to the iTunes and doing a review for us, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to improve and just keep bringing great content to you. So if you don't mind shooting over there and helping us out, that'd be a huge blessing for us. But for now, we're signing off. See you next week.
Later.